I'll probably sit. You know,
it's going to be a good video of me.
Yeah, right. If you want to pull up, what is it, the JPEG, the French cell group?
Okay.
Yeah.
Would it be helpful to turn down the lights at all?
Yeah. If it's possible to turn off just that, well, that'd be awesome if it could.
Start.
Might be able to.
Should be running as well, right?
I don't know, but
Yep.
There,
yeah, turn that on. Turn that on.
There you go.
There you go. Hey,
Good shot.
It'll be all right.
All right.
Can I move this?
You can, as long as we.
Oh yeah, so it'll capture the screen too.
Right.
Yeah. How about
Just make sure it has.
perfect?
All right.
here. Okay. Well, yeah. Thanks for inviting me. This is maybe I should do a little introduction about myself and my background, and then talk about what I'd like to talk about. In other words, give you an idea of what really this is all about. Because this is not, I should say what it is not. Maybe that's a good way of beginning. This is not about politics or really any particular ideology. Although when we get into Austrian economics, you could argue that that is a specific ideological position. But Austrian economists believe that it's just reality, right? That's the Austrian school that says that all the Austrians are trying to do, that economic philosophy, is to explain how human beings actually act economically. So you could even argue that Austrian economics is not even a specific ideology. So it's not that, it's not a political set of ideas, although political parties or political groups certainly could use these ideas if they wanted to. And in fact, when I was involved in politics, I did use a lot of these ideas. And now that I'm not involved in politics anymore, I'm still using these methodology. So I guess we're going to do like two different parts, right? We're going to talk about methodology of small groups and small group organization. Then we're going to talk about Austrian economics. So this first part really is going to be some ideas about methods to advance liberty, to advance your ideas in an effective way, efficient way, and I think a fun way. So that's really what we're going to talk about. So let me tell you about myself. I come to these ideas from actually a long history. I've many years ago, I used to be involved in the maybe you've heard of it, the house church movement, where it started in the 1970s, where it was started by a lot of young people, and they would get together in small groups in houses and essentially perform the functions of a church. They would meet together, and Christians would get together and talk about the Bible, and pray and sing and all that kind of stuff, right? So I did that for many years. In fact, I got to the point where people were asking me to go around the country and show people how to do this, and so I did that for a while, and then I kind of got out of that whole thing years ago. But those ideas, I kept the ideas around. And then when I started getting involved a little bit in politics, I realized that political organizations tend to function, at least from my experience, doing the house church and small group things, they tended to function in a very hierarchical, a very, what I would call, inefficient way, right? To actually, to teach people and to bring people into the movement and so forth. So, and of course my prejudice, my bias is, and has been for most of my life is small groups and small group ministry and all that kind of stuff. So we're not going to talk a lot about Christianity, but I will just mention that, I just want to mention that because that's kind of where I learned a lot of these ideas. And then I realized after I started doing this for a while that these ideas are not just confined to the early church or to modern day house church movements, but they go back to lots of different kinds of movements. And if those of you have read a little bit my manual, you realize that not just the early Christian church, but the socialist movement and the communist movement in the 1800s used these same techniques. So I thought it was interesting to sort of counter position those two movements and those two ideas that tended to use some of the same concepts. And this picture right here, this is ostensibly this is a picture of an anarchist cell meeting in the late 1800s somewhere in France and Paris and somewhere. I don't know if you can see it, but you know, it's really, there isn't anything really strange or mysterious about it. It's a bunch of people sitting around at tables and talking, and probably in a pub somewhere, and drinking and organizing and doing their things. And that's, so it's kind of hard to illustrate without actually being involved in a small group. What do small groups do? Well, it's a small group, and they get together and they do whatever their mission is, whatever their plan is they do it, and they do it consciously and on purpose. They do it in small groups. So, all right, let me go by the outline here. Overview of cadres. Okay, so I'm going to talk about cadres right away. Might as well, huh? So the word cadre, of course, is a word that's loaded with a. If you know a little bit about your communist history, they talk about cadres a lot. So I probably should explain what cadre is. And what all the cadres are people in these small groups that are actually committed to this idea, right? So they're sort of self-selected. If you're the way this all started was, let me give a little history of socialism in the 1800s. Socialism came out of a lot of different ideas, from some degree from the American Revolution, but a lot from the French Revolution, and then the period after then, when after the Napoleonic Wars, when the monarchical and the aristocratic groups or powers in Europe regained control from Napoleon, they sort of, they started screwing down things more and getting rid of dissidents, and so a lot of these socialist movements started from there as a result of fighting that. But most of them, for the first 100 years of socialism in the 1800s, they were mostly illegal organizations. They were subject to imprisonment, and many of these people had to leave certain countries and run around and go to different places. And so they learned actually fairly quickly that if they were going to succeed as a minority, a small minority ideological movement, that they had to be, some of them were on the run. They were not considered to be under the protection of any kind of a state. In fact, as socialists are, they don't really like the state, and they were, rebelling against it. So they had to take care of it. They had to watch out for the police and the secret police and so forth and so on. So they very naturally started organizing in these small groups, and that became the way that socialism as a movement really expanded and grew throughout the 1800s. And if you know something about your early Christian history, some parallels, right? The first few centuries of Christianity in the Roman Empire, Christianity was a legal organization. It was against the law to be a Christian, and Christians were persecuted to the point of death. And if they, their meetings were illegal, and their practices were considered to be treasonous, anti-state, because of course, why Christians, some of you Christians, you know, they didn't want to worship the state gods, right? They were against that. In fact, they denied that they were even really, you know, the gods, and so, you know, they got in a lot of trouble. So there were no Christian churches in the first 3 centuries of Christianity. There were no buildings, there were no signs saying, please come to service or mass, you know, Sunday mornings, you're welcome, you know, none of that stuff, right? If they did, they would all immediately be arrested and the place would have been burned down and so forth. And in fact, the last great persecution, right at the end of the 3rd century, you know, they were starting to build a few churches, and that's exactly what the Roman government did. They burned them, right? So they organized in a very similar fashion as well. They houses, small groups, very decentralized. So I guess what I'm saying is I guess you can see right away I'm saying that there's some safety as part of this, but that's really not the real reason that I would that I think you should consider this idea. The real reason is for efficiency and for effectiveness. The early Christian church was a very, very small minority, and by the end of the 3rd century, as the Roman Empire was economically collapsing all over the Roman Empire, by the end of the 3rd century, the Roman Emperor, it was, when Constantine came, they realized that the only social society that was left that had some cohesiveness to it and that was prospering in the face of this economic downturn were the Christians. And so they actually came to the top, not just because their ideas were expanding and growing and people were joining the movement, but that they were economically successful and prosperous when the rest of the Roman people were dying and suffering. So they actually had a method that kept not only that allowed their movement to actually grow, even in the face of persecution, but also to prosper. So, and then of course unfortunately we all know the story of socialism, that starting in the early 1800s, by the end of World War II, over half of the world was openly socialist governments or socialist ideas. Some people think that that's still the way it is, or certainly the majority of the population of the world is still under ostensibly socialist governments. And you and I could argue about this, but I would argue with you that this country that we live in right now is a socialist country from all the standards of the Communist Manifesto and all the things that they talked about in the 1800s. This is what we have in our country. So socialism won. It won. The idea of socialism has won. There are still some, battles going on, obviously, and there's still some people struggling against it, but it succeeded. And my contention here, or my thesis, my argument is that ideas are important, but also methodology is important. And in both of those cases, the case of the early Christian church and the case of the socialist movement, they had some pretty good methodology. So back to cadres, I kind of got it. And by the way, jump in and ask questions, or say, I don't understand what you're talking about, or say, I think you're full of crap. Feel free to do that. But where does this idea of cadre come from? Well, in 1905, a guy named Lenin, Russian activist, political activist, right, communist, he wrote this thing, he wrote this long essay, kind of a short book, or it was really kind of an essay. He said, "What shall be done?" And he wrote this during the time when socialists, particularly the Bolsheviks and all the socialist movements in Russia, were being arrested and thrown in prison or exiled. They had tried in the early beginnings of the 20th century. They thought, well, there was a lot of unrest in Russia, and they thought that they had a chance to maybe overthrow the government, but it didn't work, and they failed. And so Lenin was writing this to say, you know what, we screwed up, and it's not working, and so we have to change. So what shall we do? And the point of this, and you can read it, it's translated in English, and it's a good read, you should read it. He basically said, we've been doing this wrong. And this is what he said. He said, we've been trying to teach all the workers, you know, for 100 years. We bring them in to our meetings and we teach them socialist doctrine. We try to get them to understand the Marxist dialectic and why, you know, why labor is being exploited and why capitalism is bad and all this stuff. And we gave them books and we lectured to them, but most of them didn't care. Most of them didn't listen. Because most people are just concerned about, you know, I work and I'm, you know, when I'm done working I'm tired and I want a beer and I want to go home and I don't want to listen to a bunch of socialist claptrap, you know. And Lenin actually recognized that that's the case for most people, the vast majority of people. You know from your own political activism if you do that. Most people in this country aren't a member of either of the major parties. And they're never going to be. And even those people that are, most of them, all they do is vote. They might give a few bucks to a candidate or a party at some point. But that's the way it is, most people. So what Lenin said is that we have to change our focus. We have to build cadre, is what he said. That is that we have to find those people that really do want to do something, that have some energy and have some passion for the movement. And those people are the ones that we should focus on and spend our time with and really help them become really, really, in his case, really, really solid socialists or communists. Make them very, very, not just skilled in the ideas, but skilled in delivering the message, in speaking, in writing, organizing. These are our supermen. These are the people that are going to move this thing forward, because what he recognized was when you have people like that, they can influence hundreds, if not thousands, of other people. If just one of those people. But if you have just a bunch of just normal people in a room and nobody really develops those abilities, then the movement stalls and it doesn't go anywhere. So, and interestingly, I'll go back to Christianity. The parallel is, of course, disciples, right? Some of you know that. Is that what did Jesus say? He said, you know, Jesus said, I want all you, you know, thousands of people, after I've fed you bread and, you know, or turned the rocks into, you know, the stones into bread, whatever. You're all going to be disciples. No, he didn't say that. He said he picked out those that would be the ones that could really learn. How many people were in Jesus' small group? 12. Or as I like to say, one too many, right? Remember Judas? He might have wanted to just go with 11, right? You know, but he went with 12, and we know what happened. But right, that was his design. That was his natural way of designing the methodology of his the way he ministered, the way he organized his thing. So, so cadres, does that make sense now? Do you understand what a cadre is? What are the advantages? Well, the advantages really are what you're looking for is quality, not quantity, right? What we're trying to do here is actually help individuals grow. I think that this actually works well and fits in a lot with individualist libertarian philosophy. In other words, we're all individuals. I really don't care so much about the collective. I really don't care if the collective is powerful. I really don't, and I mean that, and again, no offense to anybody that's in a political party, I really don't care whether the political party is strong or weak or whatever. I care about individuals. You know, they're the only real things that really exist are, you know, individual human beings. And if we want to, my argument here again is that if we want our movement to succeed, first, those individuals we have to help each other become better at the message, better at knowledge, understanding of it, I get into later on, or when I talk to, sometimes I do a little leadership stuff too, and I actually mentioned Leonard Reed, who wrote about 50 years ago now, a book called Libertarian Leadership, and he kind of goes back to the same idea. You know what? If you want to be a leader, then change yourself first, right? That's what you have to work on, is yourself. If you want to lead other people, you know, why don't you first figure out whether you believe this stuff yourself? And the only way you know whether you believe it is if you act according to your beliefs. And that's your check. You know, you can look in the mirror and you can say, well, you know, I talk a good game, but how do I live? What do I really believe? And so the small group makes it actually a lot easier for people to help each other grow individually. And if in fact we don't win, that you know, the next 1,000 years is the boot on the face forever, right? If that's a scenario that could be the case, right? But if individuals still believe and still have those ideas in there, and they believe them and act on them, they can never totally win, right? In other words, the only way they win is if the ideas go away and nobody cares about the ideas anymore, and nobody has any ability to convince other people and persuade other people and get these ideas transferred on. So this is why in my groups we start with ideas and education and try to, you know, show people stuff, and people that are something maybe that they haven't heard before. We want to show them new things about the way the world really works, the way our economics really works. This is the foundation, the core of what groups should be about. Then, of course, you want to try to get more people, obviously, but it really starts with individuals, because if we have if we're convinced ourselves of the truth of these things, and then we actually have spent enough time learning them that we can articulate them with effectiveness, guess what's going to happen? We're going to attract other people. People are going to, some people are going to listen. Some aren't. Some are going to shut up. But some will be able to, and really all we're doing is looking for the people that already have a propensity for this anyway, and we just want to say, hey, you're on the right track. You know, this is really, you know, you're right. You're right about the red pill, right? You're right about the matrix. You know, this isn't the way the world really should work. So, is that enough? I mean, we could go on about small groups, but I do the math thing right in the manual about relationships, right? That you have to maintain relationships, and our brains are only really capable of maintaining close relationships with a finite amount of people. And so you really have to kind of decide who you're going to maintain relationships with. And this is why, you know, at some point you get too big, the system turns into a hierarchical system, because it has to, because there's no way that individuals can maintain interpersonal relationships after a certain point. You know, you can't remember people's names.
So that's kind of the 12 to 15.
Well, there actually there's different studies on this, but basically, here's the way it works. It's like it's not a firm number, right? I mean, I've kidded around with Jesus and the 12, but he did pick 12. I mean, that wasn't my choice; it was his choice, and maybe the number is meaningful in a lot. You know, the 12 tribes, of course, and you could talk about that. But the point is that he had the 12, and that's who he spent most of his time with. So. What it is it's more of the people that study, you know, this stuff, this psychology. What they say is the more people you have, the more time you have to spend sitting around and say, hey, how you doing? How was work today? You gotta make sure that everybody's happy. And if they're not happy, if they're sad, you got to find out why they're sad. And, you know, you spend a lot of time in what they call social grooming, right? And the more people you have, the more time you have to do that. So if you're going to have a group that actually gets stuff done, that actually is an action group, you have to keep it small, because if the group gets too big, pretty soon all you're doing is social grouping, right? Some people say that the max limit number is the Dunbar's number of 150. You know, again, you could make it a little higher, a little lower, but the point still stands, is that the more people you have, the less you're going to be outwardly focused, the more you're going to be, well, you know, we have this big group, and, well, you know how it is. I mean, I used to, when I was doing the church thing, this was the whole point of the house church thing, is that here's what happens, folks. You get, your church expands, and it's a wonderful thing, you got a dynamic preacher and everything goes. Pretty soon, you got to build a church, you got to build a building. Well, now, you got to spend some funds, people got to spend more time on that, working on the building, so their efforts on the actual, you know, spreading the message are, some of them are obviously have to be diverted, because you have to build a building, you have to have bathrooms, you have to have a kitchen, you know, so forth and so on, right? So if you're trying to, if you want a group that actually has that ability to really get things done, to actually take action, and has a small enough people that everybody can have really close relationships, because if you have really close relationships, it helps you get things done. Then you want to keep that group small. So so that's why I talk about splitting groups, and we've already seen it in the groups that we've done in the Minneapolis area. When they get too big, when, you know, we start getting a lot of people, like I always say, you know, when I'm starting to get 15, 20 people regularly, it's time to split. And we've done that now. Two or three, one of them butted off. It's complicated. It's chaotic. It's not very neat and clean. It's just kind of people decide, and that's a good thing. You know, people decide, you know what, I don't like your group, but I like what you're doing. I'm going to start a group over here, right? And I'm like, go do it, please, you know. And then let me know if you need any help. I'll come over and, you know, help you if you want. If you don't want, I won't help you. And so that's kind of the way it works. Growing. So we're kind of getting into the whole growth thing. Questions so far? Where are we at? Number 3, 3A.
Yeah.
Well, real quick.
Yeah.
So you talked about how they spread Marxism with the small cadres. How they keep that message clear, so it didn't kind of one person decided to take it off message and turn it something totally different.
Yeah.
There had to be some sort of centralized, you know, management of it, so to speak.
Well, actually, interestingly enough, they didn't keep it clear. You know, let's face it. There's as many brands of socialism as there are denominations of Christianity, maybe more. And yeah, the only way you keep, if you're concerned about doctrine or dogma, don't do this. You know, if you want to keep your message really pure, this isn't a way to do it. People will come up with their own ideas, just because that's the way it is. You know, people they will emphasize certain things, other things. Early Christianity was the same thing. Very, very diverse belief systems. You know, a central idea that was a core, but beyond that, very diverse. The way Christianity became orthodox, or more sort of the belief system became sort of standardized, was through the power and the sword of the Roman Empire, right? When it became a Roman imperial religion, then the heretics, you know, then it was not just a bad idea to be a heretic, it gets you killed, you know, right? And the same thing happened in socialism, right? Is that the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks and the Trotsky, you know, well, Trotsky was kind of with Lenin at that time, but there was the anarcho-communists, there were all the other little groups, the Social Democrats, and once political power became the main objective, well, you know what happened. I mean, the purges happened, and then the Bolsheviks become the orthodox communism, and the rest of them are exiled, and then Trotsky ends up with an ice pick in his head. That's what happened. So, yeah, I think that my answer is, sorry, you're not going to have, you're not going to have any one set of ideas that everybody has to follow. One playbook, one Bible, unfortunately. But what it also means is that the best ideas gain more traction. The best ideas win in small groups, because it's a marketplace. Is what it is. It becomes in a sense in an ideological sense of the liberty movement. It becomes a bunch of small businesses that have a product and services, and they are pitching it to whatever their group of people is. Some of them do well. Some of them have ideas that are better ideas. Some of them are better, more efficient at making those things work. Others aren't as efficient, and they will they'll die out. They won't be as successful. So it's let the market decide. I think it's amazing how Mises Institute. Some of you know about the Mises Institute, but here's an economics institute that was started on a shoestring. Ron Paul, a couple other people had some money, but not a lot of money. I mean, this was started in the '80s with tens of thousands of dollars, nothing like millions. Unlike the Cato Institute, right, which started around the same time. And the Cato Institute, of course, spends a lot of money on buildings, and expensive buildings in Washington, D.C., and they have lots of paid fellows and so forth, and this is the way they operate, and the Koch brothers give them a lot of money, millions of dollars a year. This is the way they operate. And then you have the Mises Institute, which is, small donations and volunteer scholars, and they print stuff out, they make it available for free on the internet. Well, I think some of you know what's the more popular, the more widely read, the more used, website, certainly. It gets the most press. It's the Mises Institute, Lou Rockwell, not the Cato Institute. So it's not a matter of money. It's a matter, again, of ideas and having successful ideas and getting them out there. And now you actually have, speaking of the decentralizing, there's now 22 Mises Institutes around the world, and that have all started, and they weren't even really started. I suppose, in a way, if I wanted to compare this, they might have had something. You have scholars from other countries that would come to the Mises Institute, and they say, we should do this in our country. So what do? They go back to their country and they start one. And then the Mises Institute people say, can we help you? And they say, yeah, or no, or whatever. And then if they want help, they get help, and it helps them grow, So I think that kind of model is even working there, to some degree. More questions?
I have a question on the cadre idea, because you said that you've had several splits in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area. Is there any type of leadership communication between? I mean, is it just kind of an ad hoc type of thing, or is there any type of communication so that the different cells can kind of be on they're on the same wavelength, or how is that working?
Yeah, I admit I did do a little. I primed the pump a little. About a year ago, or actually a little over a year ago now, about 15 months ago, I realized that the Ron Paul campaign was going to end, after the 2012 election, and even though I was really involved in it, I kind of realized that, well, it's not going to be president. So what I did is I just invited some people and asked them to invite other people if they wanted to, and we started having some breakfast meetings where we just talked about some of these ideas. And I was very open and honest with them. I just said, look, here's what I'm looking for. If you care to, if you like my ideas and you care to participate, is that some of you may want to help start a group, at some point. And again, I'll teach you everything I know about it. I'll give you as much ideas and help as I can. And then, but at some point, this group is already, the group itself in Minneapolis is already just getting too big, and I needed, I was trying to train some cadre. Is what I was trying to do, was sort of jumpstart some cadre, and it worked to a degree. In other words, not everybody in that group was interested, and not everybody is decided to do it, but several have, and they had a little head start now, and they kind of understand some of the ideas, and so those groups are actually doing very well. And then we have some others that are, a little rougher start because for one reason or another, this depends on the group, depends on the people. But those groups, of course, what I'll try to do is I'll try to help them more a little bit. I'll try to say, all right, what can I do to help troubleshoot? So you can attract more people, whatever I can do. So, yeah, I think, does that answer?
Yeah, a little bit. It seems like more like a more centralized communication. Kind of what I was getting at is has there been any type of kind of leadership structure so you can have the cadre communicate amongst each other, so you can have, it's more of an individualistic, sounds like, endeavor rather than an organizational overlay or anything along those lines.
Only if they want to. If they want to talk to other people, but I don't really, there's no requirement. There's nothing saying that, well, you have to show up to the leaders meeting. It's none of that.
Well, it's probably the disadvantage of the cadre. We talked about the advantages, and it's probably one of the disadvantages for trying to have a nationwide effort. But
What do you mean?
If you want to have a hierarchical organization, this is not the way to do it. My argument is that hierarchy doesn't work. Hierarchy is the way you actually stop the movement. This way, there's no limit to the amount of groups that you can have. But it's true. Whoever of you here that wants to be the leader of the entire movement, you won't be with this kind of organization. Sorry. Because it's already happened to me. There's some of the people that are like, Nick, thanks for all you've taught us. Now go away. Right? We've heard enough of your stuff, and we understand it now. We got it figured out. We're going to do our own thing. And I'm like, all right, great. Have a good time. Check in if you want. Tell me how it's going. Because, maybe we ought to, okay, let's do the video. Let's do Larry and Demolition Man on leadership, on libertarian leadership, the movie, or the movie clip. Find it? I think that's it. Oh,
Power to the people.
Power to the people.
Right here?
You need some audio, probably. Maybe expand it.
I may not have. Let's see if I can. We'll go ahead and turn the audio on.
restart.
See, I knew these clips would come in handy at some point. Yeah, but it's
I got the volume all the way up.
You have to turn the player clip too.
Oh, yeah. Okay, we'll start over.
I guess you weren't part of the cut clothing. Greed, deception, abuse of power, that's no plan. That's why everybody's down here? You got that right. See, according to Costello's plan, I'm the enemy. Because I like to think. I like to read. I'm into freedom of speech and freedom of choice. I'm the kind of guy that's sitting at the school and wanted king. Snag the T-bone steak with a jumbo rack of barbecue ribs with a side order of gravy fries. I want high cholesterol. I want to eat bacon and butter and buckets of cheese, okay? I want to smoke Cubans around the sides of Cincinnati in the non-smoking section. I want to run through the streets naked with green jello all over my body reading Playboy magazine. Why? Because I suddenly might feel the need to, okay, pal? I've seen this. You know what it is? It's a 47-year-old virgin sitting around in his beige pajamas drinking a banana broccoli shake singing I'm an Oscar Mayer wiener. You look up top, you look hot toast with what he wants, when he wants, how he wants. Your other choice? Come down here, maybe start with that.
All right, then why don't you take charge and lead these people out of here?
I'm no leader. I do what I have to do. Sometimes people come with me. All I want to do is bury cocktails
That's the line.
and shit and let them think happy, happy thoughts forever.
I guess you weren't part of the cocktail plan.
Greed, deception, abuse of power, that's no plan.
Just repeat that.
Yeah. Almost
So, right.
like a cocktail or replace it with Bloomberg.
Right. So the line, right? The line is, I'm no leader.
Yeah.
I do what I got to do. Sometimes people come with me. If you want to know in a phrase what libertarian leadership is, that's what it is. We have no power. If we're practicing what we believe, we have no power to tell people what to do, to force people to believe or to follow us. And we don't have any title. If you have a title, sometimes people will follow you because of the title, which is dangerous, right? Because then they're following you because they think, you know what, maybe I can kind of get it on the inside track and I get some special favors. But if you got no power and you got no title and you're doing what you believe is right to do, how do you know? How do you know if you're a leader? Well, sometimes people come with you. Right? So that's the kind of leadership development that I promote and I try to promote within our groups. It's the only kind of leadership that I believe in. Leaders lead by example, lead by your ability to persuade, lead by your ideas. And the success of your ideas. It's the way it works in the entrepreneurial business world, right? If you know what you're doing and you're successful, guess what? People go, you know what? I'd love to buy this product. I'd love to work here. I'd love to be part of this because this is awesome. That's real leaders. I know there's other people who call themselves leaders out there. We all know who they are. You have titles. Sometimes you get to vote for them. But they're not really leaders, are they? They're just people that some people have said, well, I'm going to give you this authority to tell us what to do. So maybe that helps on the whole leadership thing. More questions, or should I go on? How to sow the seeds of liberty, unique educational opportunities. Yeah, okay, so I think I had in my manual, I had a couple pages on this, and so let me just let me just start a little bit, but feel free to jump in and ask me questions, because there's a lot to this, right? There's both what I call the evangelical side, which is the way you attract people, right, and just day to day. And then there's also the like you say, the unique educational. What do you do, right, when you got somebody that says they're interested? Right? What do you do then? And this is a lot of art as well as science. But certainly from an individual point of view, I think that going back to just what Leonard Reed said, it all starts with the individual. If you have and God, I remember when I was doing this the Christianity, the house church thing. This was such a big deal back then because we were again struggling with some of the same kind of things. You had people that were like, well, you have to have a degree in order to preach, and you have to be part of this, or you go to theological school or whatever. And what we were saying is that no, what it means, what really matters is that what's inside of you. What do you actually actually believe. Because if it's inside of you, it will come out. It will come out in all sorts of ways. So I'll give you one example. Okay, this will be fun. So I'm putting together a little kitchen, and I was at the Home Depot with a couple of the guys, and we were buying quarry tile, and we were sitting around there, and I was buying tile, trying to figure out what to do, and I was talking to the guy at the Home Depot. He said, "What are you doing with this stuff?" I said, "Well, we're building our church. We're building our temple." He said, "Oh, really? What kind of temple is this?" I said, "Well, it's really kind of a church. It's kind of a it's not really one of your well-known ones, but it's the Church of Phenomenological Agorism." That's what I told him. And he goes, "What's phenomenological agorism?" "I'm glad you asked." He said, "So the agora is the Greek word for a market." And then I looked him right in the eye. I said, "So here's the centrality of our belief system. We believe that every time we have a transaction, a trade, a transaction of a good or service that's voluntary between ourselves, at the end of that transaction, a miracle happens." And he kind of looks at me, "What do you mean?" Well, I said, "Well, think about it. I have money, but I want these tiles and the grout and all the stuff that goes along with it. You have tiles and grout and adhesive, but you're willing to give them up to me in exchange for the money I have. So I want what you have more than what I want, and you want what I have more than what you have. You want what I have more than what you want. So we do the trade, and we're both better off. To me, what bigger miracle can there be than that, right?" And he just shook his head. He said, "I've never thought about it that way, but you're right. You're right. You're absolutely right." I said, "So see, the market, the voluntary market, is a market of miracles every single day." And I said, but then of course I said, to finish up, I said, but if it's not voluntary, there's no miracle. If somebody pulls a gun to your head, then there's no miracle, is there, right? Because now one of them's better off, but the other one isn't. So that's not a miracle. Only when it's voluntary.
About sales tax.
Huh?
Sales tax.
Right. So that's the kind of stuff, and I didn't, I made this up a few months ago, and I've been trying it out. This is just what I do when I'm talking to people, and I want to try to tell people about liberty. This was my little, sales technique, my little, 3 minute, 1 minute, whatever deal. Everybody's got their own. Everybody does whatever they want to do. But the point is that I can't do that unless it's actually inside of me, right? I wouldn't have come up with the idea that voluntary transactions are miracles unless I actually believed it, right? So that's the power of actually having people that really believe the ideas of liberty instead of just, Okay, then really quick. So, okay, what do you do in the groups, right? Unique educational opportunities. So, this goes back again to early church as well as socialism. We use this technique. It's very common sense, natural technique of trying to make a point, maybe 1 point only per session, maybe 2 or 3 maximum if you really feel ambitious, but really 1 is fine. And what you're trying to do is introduce a topic and an idea, whether maybe it's markets, maybe it's whatever it happens to be, in such a way, use an example, an illustration, using movie clips, whatever you've got, to try to make 1 point that maybe people have never realized before. They've never actually caught into it. Maybe they don't. Maybe they've thought about some of these ideas, but they're stuck on something. Maybe they're stuck on the minimum wage, or maybe they're stuck on, well, a lot of people, again, no offense to everybody here, but they're stuck on the idea that we can actually have some sort of limited coercive government. Maybe we need a monopoly in justice. Maybe we need a monopoly of force. And then you explain, through example, why that's not the case, and then and your presentation is short, 5-10 minutes, and then let people talk. And but the presenter, and you've seen this from my manual, it's called guided discussion. Very powerful thing. Communists use it to great effect. What you're trying to do, the presenter's trying to do, is say, look, I got one point I'm trying to make, so I have to get my ideas down to a very, very succinct, concise set of ideas. And then I'm going to deliver those ideas, and then I'm going to listen to people talk about it. And I'm going to pay attention to what people are saying, right? And those that get it, of course, I go, he got it, she got it. Those that aren't getting, then I can jump in and help the people that are still struggling with it, right? Give them some more explanation, give them some more ideas. So you're really not doing a lecture like I'm doing too much of now. I'm trying not to. I just want to get more discussion going. But it's really not a lecture. It's the idea is that you're trying to find out whether people are actually understanding what you're trying to tell them. And the only way you can do that is not by talking like I'm doing, it's by listening and letting them tell you if they get it or not. And if they get it, you'll hear it. And if they don't get it, you'll also hear that too. So what do we do? Yeah, we do a lot of economics, we do history, and then we do pragmatic things. You know, we talk about Bitcoin, which is pretty popular. We've talked about buying gold and silver, storing foreign bank accounts, storing gold and silver somewhere else. Pragmatic things, just lots of pragmatic things about living. You know, how we're going to have Melissa Hill come and talk about how to avoid getting arrested and thrown in jail, and you know, how to deal with the police and the justice system. Very pragmatic things that most people haven't really had an opportunity to really hear about, you know, and we're going to give them lots of, we hope, unique ideas about lots of topics that pertain to liberty in general and things like that. So, and I can talk more about that, but that's what we do.
When you said Melissa Hill, when you invite people to speak, are they excited to just come to speak to a cadre?
Yeah.
Or would they rather have a larger group?
They don't have a choice. I tell them, look, you're going to be speaking to, you know, 10 to 20 people. This is, I think, usually what, in my group, that's usually what it is. Some of the groups are a little even smaller. I mean, they start a little smaller. And usually when they're small like that, I tell them, you know, just work with your little group for a while, you know. And, yeah, because it's not, you know, some people will. Some guest speakers are fine to come in and talk to half a dozen people. But I try to have a dozen. You know, well, and you know what? It doesn't even matter to me. You know, when I announced the Bitcoin thing, the first one back in October, and I talked to Doug Scribner, who's really into Bitcoin. I said, "Would you come in?" He said, "Oh yeah, well, I love it." You know, he didn't care. He wanted to talk about it. Well, that topic was so popular that we had over 20 people there, and I wasn't promoting it. It was just that people were like, "Oh yeah, I want to hear about Bitcoin." So the topic will, you know, if you get the right topic, you'll get a lot of people there. Yeah, and unfortunately, as it turns out, yeah, the truth of it is, the topics that are most important to me, right, the ones that I think are most important for people, nobody shows up. You know, I talk about I had this great talk prepared about the ancients versus the moderns, which again, see probably most of you places really don't know what I'm talking about. Very important ideological ideas from the 1600s, 1700s. And what I use is to show how ideas are so important and why ideological movements fail and succeed and so forth. And it was kind of too highbrow for most people there. Nobody like, I don't know what you're talking about, Nick. Whatever, let's drink. So sometimes you fail. You know, you have an idea and you think you got something important to tell people, but they don't want to hear it so well. So that's what happens.
How do you see the difference between the 2008 Ron Paul presidential run and 2012? Do you think it was people like you having small groups throughout the country that really spurred it, or was it just the idea that people have grabbed onto? I mean, to me, I think his numbers pretty much doubled everywhere he went.
Well, of
seems
course.
to be spreading liberty. The idea of liberty seems to be in the back of everyone's mind right now.
Yeah.
I think it's becoming relevant everywhere, and people are starting to question their own ideas and what the process we're going towards.
Yeah.
So.
Actually, to answer that question, which is probably, let's not spend too much time on it because it's kind of a little bit off topic, but I'll just say this. The Ron Paul 2008 campaign really was, from an ideological point of view, was much more important and much more ideological than the 2012 campaign. Because the only people that jumped in at the beginning of the 2008 campaign were, many of them were experienced libertarians, people that have been, like me, that have been in the movement all my life. And we started groups all over the trip. Ernie Hancock from Phoenix, who, like me, had never been involved in the Republican Party and reluctantly joined the Republican Party to be part of this thing. Ernie Hancock is the one that designed the whole love evolution thing. This was not done by any kind of centralized authority. It wasn't done by the campaign. The grassroots movement did almost the entire 2008 campaign. The 2012 campaign was different. There was more money. It definitely went up. It definitely got into more mainstream Republicans. You had a lot of people that really weren't necessarily self-identified libertarians that kind of jumped on board, and a little different. So, to me, the 2008 campaign, which I was heavily involved, I was involved with both of them, but the 2008 campaign was the one that was really almost totally driven by grassroots, and as a result, it was a little more ideologically pure, as well as a result, and as a result, it didn't get as many votes because pure ideology takes a long time. It takes longer to actually develop people that believe in ideology, and that's not the way politics works. Campaigns are like, you're trying to attract people's attention for a moment in time to just get them to cast a ballot, and it's a whole different thing. But does that help answer your question?
Yes, in a way. I guess one of the premise that I wanted to ask you again was, what's your view of politics? I mean,
people ask me that. Like I already told you at the beginning. I'm not in politics anymore.
Bother, just live their own life in liberty. Or
Well, here's my point on all this. I believe that liberty happens because people believe in it, right? If people don't believe in it, then it's not going to happen. So what I'm trying to do, and I made this very clear, I'm trying to push the ideology, right? I'm trying to educate people. I'm openly trying to help people become real libertarians. People that know their stuff, that are very well educated in the ideas and very well capable of delivering those messages. And that takes time. It's not a, again, it's in one sense, again, as I'm saying, I'm trying to build cadre. I realize that that's not for everybody. And I also realize that it doesn't really fit in with a political campaign or political movement, right? I mean, political movements are based on a calendar of, when somebody's going to be elected, and you got to try to get people's attention. You got to give them some ideas that they think that they'll be interested in, and then you got to try to get them to the polls. And then after that, you really don't give a shit anymore, right? I mean, they either voted for you or they voted against you, and then you move on, right? And then until the next election, and then you got to try it again. Where I'm at is in the gaps, right? I'm in the in between and in the valleys or in the gutter in between, trying to say, you know what, political campaigns come and go, and politicians come and go, and these ideas, whatever people think are important to vote on or whatever, they come and go. But it's what people believe is what's important. If they don't believe in liberty, if they believe in socialism, you know what? We're all going to be socialists. I'm sorry. You know, that's just the way it is. If that's what they believe is real and true and the best way for society to live and to prosper, whether it's right or wrong, that's what they're going to do. So I'm more concerned about, you know, the education and building leadership. Yeah.
What I'm hearing basically is your philosophy is to work for the long-term change in consciousness, and I see a lot of value in that. But I also see a strong need for short-term and intermediate-term activism. And my interest in your methodology is how can we apply it, maybe I'm moving into the next thing, how can we utilize this and apply this to Liberty Southwest, because we definitely have some activist goals in our organization. And I like the individualized approach of learning in a smaller group. I like a lot of what I'm hearing, but my bent is more towards accomplishing goals within the political system.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, I don't know how much I can help you there, except to say that certainly the ideas of the organizational ideas work. I think they work regardless. I think they even work for, you know, for example, they worked for the Bolsheviks until such time as that they got into power, and then it was a disadvantage, right? Then they actually had to purge all these independently thinking people, and they did. You know, they would throw them into prison and jail them and everything, because that's, you know, what you're creating here are a bunch of very self-confident individual thinkers, is what this method does, right? And that only goes so far in politics, I'm sorry to say, right? Because in politics, you guys know this. I mean, I went through it myself, you know. Not a day goes by before you hear, well, you know what, Nick, your ideas are great, but, you know, we're trying to win an election here. So would you just lay off, you know, or, Nick, this is a great long-term strategy, but, you know, we have to reach people that really, you know, your ideas just freak them out. And all they do is just, then people, they run away. And we can't have that because we're trying to get their votes. So I understand the problem. I don't know if I have a complete answer for you. I don't think I do.
I actually wasn't looking for a complete answer. I'm just looking for how we can take the ideas and blend them into our group processing so that we can achieve our goals partially using your ideas.
Maybe you can come up with some answers to your own, then, you know. I mean, again, I'd be happy to explain more about how this works. Oh, you want to talk about consensual decision making? Then we can talk about Austrian